This is Straight Talk with Atlanta native Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, and his sidekick Shanan Jones. Frank discussions of issues affecting the ATL, Fulton County, the state of Georgia, the nation, and around the world. And now, here they are, live and in living color, the team of Jones and Fann, the Preacher Man.
Well, welcome again to another edition of Straight Talk with yours truly, Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, and my co-host Shanan E. Jones. Now, Shanan is not in the studio today. It's not a contractual disagreement we have. He is just incapacitated with transportation and trying to get somewhere. That's why he's not in the studio. So what I told him to leave that Learjet plane alone that he was trying to buy and invest in a nice automobile, okay? So he's going to join us now, and we're going to bring him on. He's all set, and here he is, none other than Shanan E. Jones.
Hey, hello, Shanan. Everybody. Welcome to Straight Talk.
Hey, Shanan, I told you to leave that jet alone and just get you a real automobile.
Good things come to those who wait, Bishop.
Well, we're glad that you're here with us, even though you're in the comforts of your home. You're like Larry Spencer, you know, with the dog and everything. Good Morning America. You got Mattel in the background and everything.
He's in the foreground right now.
He's in the foreground. Well, listen, we got a great program.
I have a live studio audience.
Do what now?
I've got a live studio audience.
Live studio audience. That's all right, you know. Hey, listen, this is the way we do it. And we want to thank those of you who watch Straight Talk each and every week as we send it out. We want to thank you for subscribing to the channel and everything that you do, because as you subscribe to the channel, that let us know how much you appreciate what we are doing. So thank you so very, very much. And keep subscribing and click that subscription button and hit that bell and for notification when we come on. Then give us a thumb up that you like us. Now this week, the program this week is, we told you from the beginning that we're going to be staying on top of this January 6th committee, what's going on with this insurrection. Today we're going to be dealing with that again, but we're going to deal with something that's more closer to home also. Our own Attorney General from Fulton County, District Attorney from Fulton County, Fanny Willis, who's going to be telling us about what's going on and what she's doing as it relates to the case of Mr. Trump, calling the state Secretary of State, asking him to find him some votes to overthrow the election. So we were listen to her and what she has to say. Then we'll be listening to this debate now that's going on with the Republican Party. It's falling apart, Shanan. The Republican Party is falling apart. They're divided. Mr. Pence says the president had no right to ask them that, and that was so totally un-American, what he was trying to do.
Un-American.
So we'll be hearing more about that. And Shanan and I will be back on the other side. But now we got to hear what Miss C has to say. So we're going on to Miss C, and we'll be back with more right here on Straight Talk. Share it with your YouTube family. Hit that link, hit share, and they can join us right here on Straight Talk. Miss C, what are you talking about today?
Hello, everyone. Miss C here with your 3-minute news blast. Hey, Greg. Hey, Shanan. Y'all doing okay over there? Good to see you, I think. Anyway, New Jerusalem Missionary Baptist Church, where my good friend Thomas G. Ashford is pastor, invites you to their annual Gospel Love Fest. It's going to happen February 13th at 4 p.m. The special guests will be Kenneth the Maestro Lowe, Bishop J.D. Means, Elder Antoine Blackwell, Elizabeth Beasley, and Joseph Robinson and the Chosen Aggregation. New Jerusalem Missionary Baptist is located at 1385 Gus Thornhill Jr. Drive in East Point. All right, have you ever wanted to be in law enforcement? They need you. East Point is offering incentives to police officers or to become a police officer. They're offering a $52,000 for uncertified police officers and $55,000 for certified police officers. Now they have educational incentives for your associate degree, your Bachelor of Science degree, and increases will be offered for post certifications. Now, if you're interested in becoming a part of law enforcement for East Point, you can go to www.eastpointcity.org. That's www.eastpointcity.org. Okay. Are you suffering from depression, anxiety, PTSD, crime, mental illness, cancel culture, abuse, hatred, depression, anxiety again? There is a program called The Mental Space with Sean Carvey, and it airs on Mondays from 7 to 9 p.m., and it's on WAOK 1380, and you can listen to the broadcast and hopefully become inspired. Okay? Now, there is a little button on your screen that says subscribe. Please push that button and subscribe. And also there's another button that says like. So if you would, we'd like for you to also push that button. And if you already done so, it'll highlight and say subscribed already or something. And if you have any announcements that you would like for me to air here, just email them to straighttalknews1362@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to let everybody know about your church event, your family reunion, class reunion, whatever it might be. Okay? Now, this is Miss C signing off until next week. I'm going to put you back in the hands of Greg and Shanan, and I do apologize.
Well, Mrs. C cracked on us, Shanan. Did you hear her say it? She don't know why she's sending them back to us. Did you hear that?
I heard her. I just, I don't know. I'm lost for words with Miss T. I just, why she would think that we send folk to her all the time. I don't know why she wouldn't send them back. I'm lost for words. I just.
Well, come on in the room and let's talk about what's coming up next with DA Fann Willis in our next segment.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us what's coming up next with DA Fann Willis.
Oh, well, I tell you, the DA is, she ain't playing with Mr. Trump. This is not a game for her. And she's ready. She said she read more information than we've seen in the media, and she's ready for her subpoenas. She said in 2021, she's going to tell you in 2021, she's been getting everything ready, and she's now at the point where she's ready to push the button and began moving forward with bringing justice to the people of Fulton County. Georgia.
One of the things that, before we bring on, one of the things, and because we just saw the threat on her life in terms of, and other people there in the Fulton County building by a mysterious package being there. And we also saw on the news where Commissioner Marvin Arrington's law officers were firebombed. It looked like we're trying to go back to the 60s and the 50s, with this thing.
And the vice president's husband, the second gentleman, was rushed out of Dunbar, bomb threat at Spelman College. The other day, they had to evacuate students from the campus grounds of Spelman, and some other HBCUs as well.
Yeah, so we're going to listen to what she has to say, but this thing is getting serious because the onion is being peeled back. The real truth is coming out. And after the interview with Mrs. Willis, then we'll have Black History Facts with James Broom, who will be talking about an outstanding black actor who died, Sidney Poitier, telling his life story during Black History Month right here on Straight Talk. We'll be back on the other side after Black History Facts.
A probe of the former president's efforts to overturn the election there is pushing back on his lawyer's attempts to derail the investigation. She's also offering hints about the next steps she may take in her attempt to uncover whether anything criminal occurred after he narrowly lost the state to President Biden. CNN's Sarah Murray has the interview and the story.
The Atlanta area district attorney investigating Donald Trump says as soon as she has a special grand jury seated in May, she'll start firing off subpoenas.
Most of them will probably start to come in a heavier flow, for lack of a better word, in June and later months. But we will certainly start to do some in May.
Fulton County District Attorney Fann Willis says she isn't worried about Trump working to slow her probe into his efforts to overturn Georgia's election results in 2020.
Are you worried that former President Trump could somehow be able to avoid, delay, what's going on with your investigation?
No.
Why is that? What gives you that confidence?
This is a criminal investigation. We're not here playing a game. I plan to use the power of the law. We are all citizens. Mr. Trump, just as every other American citizen, is entitled to dignity. He's entitled to be treated fairly. He will be treated fairly in this jurisdiction, but I plan to do my job, and my job is to make sure that we get the evidence that gives us the truth. I'm not concerned at all about games to delay this.
And she cast doubt on whether Trump's oft-used argument that he can't be prosecuted for actions while president will protect him in Georgia.
I don't think that protection will prevent a prosecution if that becomes necessary in this state case.
Willis has already met with Trump's attorneys twice about her plans to move the investigation forward.
For instance, last calendar year I met with them and I assured them what I knew. We would not bring forth an indictment in the 2021 year. I met with them at the very end of 2021 to tell them that I would be moving forward, not necessarily with an indictment, but with the next step of an investigation.
Willis launched her investigation nearly a year ago, after an hour-long recording went public of Trump pressing Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find the votes for Trump to win Georgia.
All I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Last month, in her request for a special grand jury, she told the court she had reasonable probability of criminal disruptions around the 2020 election.
You and I have listened to that phone call, but also I have the benefit of also having talked to a lot of witnesses and probably having read more on this than most people would like to.
She's digging into Trump's actions as well as those of his allies, including former attorney Rudy Giuliani, former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, witnesses she may subpoena as part of her probe.
I imagine that we're going to be issuing subpoenas to a lot of people and that all of them are not going to welcome our invitation to come speak with us.
She hopes to make a charging decision by the end of 2022. We sat down with Willis in an Atlanta hotel as her office was under lockdown from a possible security threat at the Fulton County Courthouse. Willis was already on high alert after Trump took aim at her and other prosecutors during a rally.
I hope we are going to have in this country the biggest protest we have ever had in Washington, D.C., in New York, in Atlanta.
After those comments, Willis asked the FBI for help assessing potential security deficiencies and sharing intelligence on potential threats.
I don't want to pretend like I didn't hear what I heard. It would be just crazy for me to not pay attention to that. So I wanted to make sure that they were also paying attention.
And Sarah Murray joins us now. Terrific report, Sarah. What did District Attorney Willis tell you about Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger and whether he will testify?
Yeah, if there's anyone at the heart of this case other than Donald Trump, it is the Georgia Secretary of State. But Fann Willis made clear she understands what it is like to be in the middle of a campaign, which Secretary Raffensperger, of course, is in for his re-election. She said that she is not going to call him in right before the GOP primary, which is going to be in May. She said his head would not be focused on her case, focused on her investigation, but she does expect to talk to him after that primary, John.
All right, Sarah Murray, thank you very much. Perspective now, in her first appearance as a CNN political commentator, Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta. Mayor, welcome aboard. Great to have you.
Nice to join you. Thank you.
So, opening an investigation is one thing. Bringing charges is another thing. Getting a conviction, a third thing entirely. So, do you think this investigation has any teeth?
Absolutely. The district attorney would not pursue the special grand jury if it did not have teeth. And just by way of background with Fann Willis, she is a seasoned prosecutor. She's not an administrator. She's not a bureaucrat. She was one of the top prosecutors in the district attorney's office before she sought to become the district attorney. I've worked with Fann in 3 different places, including her first job out of law school, and she walked in the door fearless. So if she is pursuing this, given her experience, given what she knows about what you need to move forward with a criminal case, I assure you there's something there.
You know, we played it in Sarah's piece right there, and in a 2-year period of some of the craziest politics I've ever seen, the piece of sound where Donald Trump says, I need you to find me 11,000 votes. As a piece of evidence, if that isn't incriminating, I'm not sure I understand what is. Can you explain? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the other part to this, you had Rudy Giuliani come and testify before the Senate in Georgia. We don't know if he gave false information. I'm pretty sure that he did during that testimony. At least what I heard, it seemed to be false information. So you have that piece. Also, the call from Lindsey Graham to the Secretary of State, and also the U.S. Attorney at that time, B.J. Pack, who abruptly resigned shortly after the election. And if my recollection is correct, it was based on a call from someone related to this election. So there are still so many things. There are things that we know and there are things that we don't know. And that's what the special grand jury is about. They have up to a year to hear testimony, and they can make recommendations on whether or not criminal charges should proceed. The judge who is presiding over this special grand jury is also a former prosecutor. So you have that piece as well, someone who obviously understands the law. He is a sitting judge, but has also worked as a prosecutor, and I'm sure will be very much in tune with what the district attorney is presenting.
What do you think the implications on other elections would be? Again, if charges were not brought here, what message would it send about something like this being okay?
This is extraordinary in and of itself. The fact that we had a president of the United States interfering with an election, the fact that we are looking at criminal charges against a former president of the United States. So it is also extraordinary. Were it not true, it would be very difficult to believe that this were happening in our country. So I think that it's important that not only that Fann Willis here in Georgia take a serious look and make a determination, but also prosecutors across the country who may also have reason to believe that something was done inappropriately to interfere with the election. Because our democracy is about more than one person. It's the reason we call it a democracy. And whether it be the president of the United States or anyone who is seeking to interfere with the sacred right to vote in our democracy, they must be held accountable.
We have just a few seconds left, Mayor. One of the things that we heard DA Willis say was that she wasn't going to bring in the Secretary of State to testify before a primary election, which in a way is saying politics is going to supersede the criminal investigation, the legal status. Is that normal?
Well, I think that she is being respectful that this is election season. And I would argue that by bringing in the Secretary of State in the midst of a primary, some would argue that she is seeking to tilt the election one way or the other. So I think that it is very smart, very appropriate that she not bring him in during the primary. Let the voters have their say, and then proceed accordingly. Again, the special grand jury has up to a year to make a decision, make recommendations, and so there's plenty of time without interfering with the election. And it's also not unusual for charges not to be brought even by the U.S. Attorney during an election.
Former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, thank you very much for being with us tonight, and welcome to the CNN family.
Thank you.
And the Preacher Man, right here on Straight Talk with Black History Facts with Brother James Broom.
In recognition of Black History Month, Straight Talk will be honoring actor, film director, producer, and diplomat Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier was born 3 months premature on February 20th, 1927, while his parents, Evelyn and Reginald Poitier, who lived in the Bahamas were in Miami, Florida, visiting and selling their produce to wholesalers. He was not expected to survive, but his parents remained in Miami and nursed him to health. Now, Sidney Poitier did grow up in the Bahamas, but by being born in Miami, Florida, it entitled him to U.S. citizenship. It is believed that Sidney Poitier's ancestors migrated from Haiti and were among the runaway slaves who established maroon communities throughout the Bahamas, including Cat Island, where Sidney lived with his family until he was 10. By age 16, and after a brief stay in Miami, Sidney Poitier relocated to New York City with a desire to become an actor, but failed in his first audition with the American Negro Theater. With the onset of World War II, Sidney Poitier lied about his age and enlisted into the Army. Now, while stationed in Northport, New York, Sidney Poitier would read newspapers and magazines out loud, perfecting his reading abilities as well as perfecting his English. Well, after leaving the Army, and after several more failed auditions, Sidney Poitier finally landed a role on Broadway in Lysistrata, which got him noticed. And in 1950, Sidney Poitier appeared in the Darryl Zanuck film No Way Out, where he played a doctor treating a Caucasian bigot played by Richard Widmark. Well, Sidney Poitier's outstanding performance in No Way Out led to more prominent roles, such as Cry the Beloved Country with Canada Lee in 1951, Blackboard Jungle in 1955, but it was his performance in Edge of the City in 1957 that the film industry could no longer ignore him. In 1958, he starred alongside Tony Curtis in The Defiant Ones, a film in which both performers were nominated for Best Actor, making Sidney Poitier the first African-American male actor to seriously be considered for nomination for such award. By 1959, Sidney Poitier starred in the film adaptation of Porgy and Bess opposite Dorothy Dandridge. In 1961, Sidney Poitier achieved a stellar performance in the film adaptation of A Raisin in the Sun. This film totally opened up the 1960s for him, starting with Paris Blues in 1961, Lilies of the Field in 1963, and from this role, he became the first African-American male to win an Academy Award for Best Actor. The Bedford Incident came next in 1965, followed by A Patch of Blue in 1966. By 1967, Sidney Poitier was the most successful box office draw in the world, and 1967 also proved to be the commercial peak of his career, with 3 unforgettable films: To Sir with Love, In the Heat of the Night, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. By 1972, Sidney Poitier was directing his first feature film, Buck and the Preacher with Harry Belafonte. Sidney Poitier was continually in heavy demand throughout the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and on March 2nd, 2014, Sidney Poitier received his Lifetime Achievement Academy Award given to him by Angelina Jolie. Now here's some little-known facts. From 1995 to 2003, Sidney Poitier served on the board of directors of the Walt Disney Corporation, and he was also the Bahamian ambassador to Japan until 2007. In 2009, then-President Barack Obama awarded Sidney Poitier with the Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, celebrating his artistic, social, and diplomatic achievements through which Sidney Poitier broke barriers both on and off the silver screen. Sidney Poitier died January 6, 2022. He was 94 years old. That's Sidney Poitier. They'll forget all about him, but we won't.
It's been Black History Facts with Brother James Broom right here on Straight Talk. Join us each and every Friday from 7 p.m. until 8 p.m. with yours truly, Greg Fann, the Preacher Man, and Shanan E. Jones. And do share these Black History Facts with your family and friend, and do tune in to Straight Talk. Won't you? It ain't nothing but straight talk. Thank you, Brother Broom. Great information on Sidney Poitier and his life and how he actually really began to speak and read and speak and how he was turned down for acting jobs and how he eventually got them and how he was one of the most outstanding black actors at a time when blacks were playing positions or parts rather of slaves. And he became an outstanding actor, showing what black people really were all about, and contributed to him and his family and his legacy. As we now move into another segment.
Before we leave off,
okay,
Sidney Poitier, I think one thing that I would like to say is in reading about him around the time of his death, I came across an article where Sidney Poitier said that it was because he was physically thrown off of the stage, like they literally threw him off the side stage door, and told him that he certainly couldn't act, that he'd be a cook or something like that. That it was that adversity, that shock, that caused him to come back to the stage, and to become the great thespian that he was. So many times, God is the judge, not people who think that they're in the know, not the directors and the producers and the people who think that they do this. When you've got something burning on the inside of you, even when 1 million people say no, keep showing up, because that 1,000,001 person may be the one that helps you get to that space where you can hoist that Oscar like he did, to be the great gold standard of not just black actors, but Sidney Poitier was perhaps the gold standard of acting. Point blank, period. And to think that somebody told him he would be nothing but a cook is very interesting. God had another plan, clearly.
I do want to add to that is that one, as you said, what you just said is that for many black actors and actresses who have been playing the role of the cooks and the butlers, this caused them to see a black person that you could do better. And one of the things that in terms of being the actor, and many people today who are actors all say that Sidney Poitier was their role model. And one of the things my grandmother said, my late grandmother, my father's mother, said to me as a kid, a quitter never wins and a winner never quits. If you, as you just said, if that is something that you want to do, it's something that you have to continue to strive to do. A delay is not a denial. You just simply have to have the faith, the trust, and the belief that you can, and it will happen. It may not happen when you want it to happen, how you want it to happen, but it can happen if you just stay persistent in it, what it is that you're trying to do. And he did that. And as you said, he won that Oscar. He won that Oscar. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Mitch McConnell, who's saying now it was an insurrection. We're going to hear from Mike Pence, who's saying that the president is wrong. The former president was wrong. He could not overturn the election, and that was very un-American. And we're going to hear more and more and more about the censorship of Mrs. Cheney and Mr. Kinzinger by the Republican Party. We'll be back on the other side. We're going to talk more about that, Shanan and I. And we may be divided on this issue. We'll be back. Don't you go nowhere.
Well, let me give you my view of what happened January the 6th. And we're here. We saw what happened. It was a violent insurrection for the purpose of trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power after a legitimately certified election from one administration to the next. That's what it was.
That's what it was. Loud, Clear, saying it the truth. McConnell also said it is not the job of the RNC to pick and choose which Republicans it supports.
Trump gets name-checked by his former number two. I'm Michael Smerconish in Philadelphia. Former Vice President Mike Pence called out his old boss yesterday, but not in a way that Trump wanted. It was just one of several developments yesterday, all tied to the events of January 6. First, former Vice President Mike Pence said the words, "President Trump is wrong."
And I heard this week that President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong.
Here's what Trump had to say about that. Quote, "The vice president's position is not an automatic conveyor if obvious signs of voter fraud or irregularities exist. That's why the Democrats and rhinos are working feverishly together to change the very law, because they now say they don't want the vice president to have the right to ensure an honest vote. In other words, I was right and everyone knows it." Meanwhile, the Justice Department released brand new video on Friday evening in connection with the January 6 investigation. I have to warn you, these contain violent imagery. The videos include the mob infiltrating the office of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, pepper spray being used against police guarding the Capitol, and verbal threats of violence against the vice president. Watch the right side of your screen. You're going to see some vicious behavior against law enforcement. Two guys in particular on the right side of the screen. Here comes one of them. There he is with the red hat. Watch his buddy show up in a tan shirt, a red hat, and a beard. Here he comes. There it is, right cross. Keep watching him. Keep watching. Uppercut coming. Uppercut at law enforcement. Disgraceful, right? Looks like a billy club being used. All this on the same day that the Republican National Committee censured the two Republican members of the January 6th committee, Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, for, quote, participating in a Democrat-led persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in legitimate political discourse. Though they later tried to walk back this rebranding, that wording remained in the resolution. The original proposal had been to expel them from the party. In response, Utah Senator and 2012 GOP presidential nominee Mitt Romney, who happens to be the uncle of the RNC chair, he tweeted this: "Shame falls on a party that would censure persons of conscience who seek truth in the face of vitriol. Honor attaches to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for seeking truth, even when doing so comes at great personal cost." Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana similarly tweeted, "The RNC is censuring Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger because they are trying to find out what happened on January 6th? Huh?" House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy refused to answer questions about the censure or the mounting pressure that he's under to endorse a primary challenger to Cheney. But Cheney responded by calling GOP leaders, quote, willing hostages to a man who admits he tried to overturn a presidential election and suggests he would pardon January 6 defendants, some of whom have been charged with seditious conspiracy. Yet another development. Phone records revealed that on the morning of January 6, the former president called Representative Jim Jordan and spoke to him for 10 minutes. This directly contradicts what Jordan told the Rules Committee, which is that he only spoke with the president that day after the attack. That afternoon, Jordan took to the House floor to object to the certification of President Joe Biden's Electoral College win. Okay, so what does it all mean? I'm not surprised that former Vice President Mike Pence believes any of the things that he said yesterday. I'm only surprised that he finally decided to say them. His remarks to the Federalist Society were a flat-out rebuke of former President Trump. He name-checked Trump. He said that Trump was wrong, that he had no right to overturn the election, and he even went so far as to call that idea un-American. Something else, Pence's choice of venue was politically wise. This was not a speech that Pence could have delivered to the RNC gathering in Salt Lake City that censured Cheney and Kinzinger. He'd have been panned there. Instead, he chose to break from Trump on constitutional grounds in front of the Federalist Society. This is a 40-year-old organization of conservative and libertarian lawyers who fashion themselves as originalists or textualists. In other words, they want the Constitution strictly interpreted, which is why Pence tied his comments specifically to Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. They would get that reference. If there would ever be a supportive audience of right-leaning lawyers for Mike Pence, well, this was it. And by combining his criticism of Trump with a prediction that Kamala Harris in 2025 will preside over the transference of power back to Republicans, well, he guaranteed himself an applause line. It was politically brilliant. But whether Pence's break with his former boss changes the bigger picture of the GOP, that remains to be seen. Because up until now, it's been just a handful of establishment Republicans, usually on their way out of Congress, who suddenly find their voice. And as for how far Vice President Pence is willing to take his new resolve, let's see if he testifies before the January 6th commission. Several of his former aides, including advisor Mark Short, have already done so. So too his former lawyer and the three-star general who served as Pence's national security advisor. Joining me now is Matthew Seligman. He's a fellow at Yale Law School's Center for Private Law. He's taught at Harvard Law School on the topic of disputed elections, and he just published a provocative paper that was covered at the Washington Post called A Realistic Risk Assessment of the Presidential Election of 2024. Okay, Matthew, can a vice president reject the Electoral College?
Absolutely not. That was never the case. It wasn't the case in 2020, and it won't be the case in 2024. Vice President Pence was absolutely correct in rejecting that power, and Vice President Harris doesn't have it going forward.
Would you call that a textualist or originalist interpretation, something that the Federalist Society would agree with?
Yes. From the very founding of our country, the vice president didn't have this power. And that's very clear if you look at the way that presidential elections operated from the very beginning. The founders were aware of the potential conflict of interest between the vice president and a presidential election. And so when they ratified the 12th Amendment, which now governs our Electoral College, they knew that the vice president couldn't have that power. And their practice at the time confirms that they never meant to give the vice president that power.
Okay, well, to President Trump's point, then why is there change needed in the Electoral College Act of 1887? He says, I'm right, because otherwise there wouldn't be this move afoot to modify the law.
For two reasons. The first is that the Electoral Count Act of 1887 is extremely unclear. It's poorly worded. People, lawyers, members of Congress have a really difficult time understanding it. And that's exactly why there was so much confusion about what the vice president's legal powers were, what Congress's legal powers were in January of 2021. So it should be changed for that reason. But there's another and potentially more important reason, which is that the way the law is structured right now, although it doesn't give the vice president powers, it gives both governors and Congress powers to intervene in the results of an election that are just too dangerous to let remain.
Have there been issues with the Electoral College Act of 1887 since 1887?
Yes, the most dramatic problem was obviously in 2021, but there have been objections before, and it hasn't gotten to the point where it is now, but it's come from both parties, and I think that's important to remember. In 2004, members of the Democratic Party objected to the re-election of President Bush, and the results in Ohio, raising concerns about voting machines and potential improprieties in the tabulation of votes. Those objections were frivolous, and they shouldn't have been brought. Now, luckily, it never got to the point where there was any possibility of actually overturning the results in 2004, and importantly, it wasn't taken seriously enough to provoke violence on January 6th. That's obviously changed, and that's why the law has to change as well.
So I referenced in your introduction that you have taught about disputed elections, including at the Harvard Law School, and you recently published a risk assessment for 2024. I know you've war-gamed out scenarios. What worries you most about 2024? What could happen? Paint the picture.
What worries me most is actually not congressional interference on its own of the type that we saw on January 6th of last year. It's instead the manipulation of the results by a governor. So the Senate has demonstrated itself to remain reasonable, and we hear from Senator Romney's comments just yesterday that there are a large number of senators in the Republican Party who remain committed to the rule of law. But we can't be so certain about that, about the House of Representatives. And Representative McCarthy's silence on this matter speaks volumes. And also, we see in gubernatorial candidates in swing states that those candidates are committed to the idea that they would have not certified the election results in 2020 and wouldn't do so in 2024. So the scenario that I'm most worried about is that a governor, say a Governor Perdue in Georgia, sends in a fake slate of electors and then The House of Representatives refused to reject it. And under the law as it's written right now, there's nothing that could be done to stop that.
Well, McConnell definitely brought something to bear that we all need to be paying close attention to. The great hypocrisy that is dividing the Republican Party right now. And we're seeing this in great numbers. I mean, just on the Georgia front, you've got a division, you've got Governor Kemp running against Perdue, and Kemp is telling Perdue to jump out of the race because he can't fundraise. Well, he can't fundraise because he wrapped himself up in this Trump bag, and there's a shift within the party that they're getting off of the insurrection. So Mitch McConnell in the Senate is talking about the fact that it was absolutely an insurrection after he's dilly-dallied and changed his position so many times. It's an insurrection. But then Kevin McCarthy on the other side is saying, basically that's an overreach, and he's kind of siding with the RNC that censured Adam Kinzinger and Lynn Cheney for just trying to investigate to see what happened with this thing. It's just absolutely crazy. Another thing in Georgia, Bishop, just going back to all of this, because we can't lose count of SB 202 in all of this. Do you know in the Thursday morning paper this week, in the Thursday morning AJC, that they are pushing for a Patriots souls to the polls, because they're saying that in progressive urban areas, working class people have had opportunities to be able to make sure that their vote was not disenfranchised, but rural whites are being disenfranchised, and we need a souls to the polls of patriots. Now, we're not patriots. The rural whites are patriots. They need a souls to the polls, because do you know what they said? Some of these people are working 7 days a week. I'm telling you, the great hypocrisy of all this thing is absolutely crazy. I was so happy to see the vice president finally, I can't say what I'm going to say, but he grew something. And I'm happy that he did, and that he did go ahead to the Federalists. And it was interesting where he did that. And McConnell broke that down to go to the Federalist Society to do it right there, and to basically bring it back to a reset, to say that this president literally threatened democracy, and what he did was wrong, and what he did was un-American. So let's go back to the Federalists. Let's go back to the foundation of the system of laws, and let's do a reset. And so that's what the Republicans are trying to do.
Well, look, let me just stop you right there.
Deep. It's in Congress. It's in the legislatures. It's everywhere. Go ahead, Bishop.
Let me just stop you right there. There's several things that I want to pull out of that interview as you elaborated. This whole thing of the Republican Party's censorship of two of its party members, right? And they want the Republican Party, first of all, is backing other Republicans running against Republicans who are anti the ideology of Donald Trump. So that's a big divide in the party, right? Trump has split the party. It's no longer the party of Reagan. It's now the party of Trump. The base is the party of Trump. Now you're seeing the shift of people saying, okay, perhaps we need to, and you're seeing several and many Republicans now, like Mitt Romney, who sometimes is vocal about it. His niece is the head of the RNC, the Republican Party, right? But she is taking Romney off of her name, so she wants to be called by another name. But she heads up the Republican Party. So you got you know what I'm saying, these names escape me, but you got him saying, Romney saying, okay, it's wrong what they're doing. You got others saying, for real? They're doing this for real? We need to be focused on the issues that are affecting the country, not upholding a big lie and upholding what Donald Trump wants us to uphold. We've upheld it long enough. Now it's time to move to what the issues are so that we can win these midterm elections. And I see now Pence coming out. Pence can forget ever being president or anything because he's not shown any real leadership. He was too far to the left with Donald Trump, or to the right with Donald Trump. And he was too far, and he upheld everything Donald Trump was doing when he was vice president. But now he comes out at the 9th hour after the committee has talked to his people and now saying, well, it was un-American, it's wrong, it was wrong, and I couldn't do it. Nobody, Kamala Harris doesn't have the authority to do it. Nobody has the authority to do it. And that moves to my point. The gentleman who was at the end, who was being interviewed, was asked the question about the host of the show is, why is it that they're changing or wanting to change it? Now, he said, and this is very important, I think people don't miss this, this is very important. It is not that the vice president has the authority, but under the present rules, the governor of each state has the authority to certify an election. And they can contest an election, the governor can, and then Congress will have to debate whether or not the election is, the results of that election from that state is true. Now, you know we're moving the states' rights with the Republican Party. So the hypocrisy in the Republican Party was, we want to get rid of more government and create less government. You and I and everyone that's watching this program know that lives in Georgia in particular, maybe in other states too, I'm not very sure about other states, but in Georgia, every county, major metropolitan county, is now creating cities in every county. Started in Fulton, went to DeKalb, now it's in Cobb, and moving to Gwinnett. Every county now is looking to create its own city by Republican-led people, because the Republicans want to empower themselves, because all politics is local. So they want to empower themselves from a local level by creating these cities and all of these counties. That's what they're doing. And we have to see it for what it is. And as they control local politics, then they move on to what? County. Then they move on to what? State. Then they move on to what? Federal. So we must have a watchful eye, because if the governor, he said that this was a shot across the bow. The name that he used in terms of, if Perdue is governor, Perdue will have the authority as a governor when the election is held to say, this election, these results are not accurate. And he can stop the results from every person in the state of Georgia who voted that say they won't certify those elections. The governor. And he threw out the name Perdue. So I want you to just pay attention to what's going on and what we're saying here, because it's really political. And we have to understand, I say this, Shanan, all the time, if you read your Bible, you can see politics all the way through the Bible. I mean, you can see the same thing that's happening now happen to Paul. You can see the same thing happening to anybody who was trying to do what's right. And so when you start talking about right and injustices, what we're seeing is injustice perpetrated upon the people trying to get rid of democracy. And you keep hearing this word, the United States is an experiment. It's an experiment. And then it talks about an autocratic government, or a society where you have a dictator versus having a president and a Congress and a Senate and the three branches of the government. We know that if you have a dictator, all that's done away with, because the dictator then runs the whole of the country. And they talk about, and they alluded to Russia, the Soviet Union, Putin. So let's just keep a watch and listen to what's going on and see what's going on, and let's not be weary and well doing. Let us continue to fight the good fight of faith. And I want to say, well, I'm going to Selma, Alabama on March the 6th. And we're taking a bus down there. And if you like to go, all you have to do is call 404. That's 404-756-7546. I have it up there if you'd like to get on the bus, because we want to go down there and we want to make a statement about this filibuster. But John Lewis had a bill to change all of this stuff. And they filibustered and filibustered and filibustered to the bill that's not even been acted upon, even to this day. Even to this day. And if it keep going like it's going, it probably won't even be acted upon at all. at all, period, right? Because you can't get 60 people to agree to stop the filibuster so we can move the vote to the vote. So keep a watchful eye, keep listening to Straight Talk, because we don't do nothing but hear, but do what? Straight Talk with Shanan and myself. And we want to ask you to join us again next week right here on Straight Talk with Shanan Jones and myself. Shanan, I know you got something you want to say before we close out.
Well, I think another big story, and we can talk about this perhaps next week, was Vernon Jones. You talked about the Bible as a prophet of man, gain the whole world, excuse me, and lose his soul.
If he ever had one.
Because Vernon Jones, I thought President Trump had said that he was going to run Vernon Jones for governor, and thought he was going to support him, but he didn't. So now they've told him to get out of the way, make room for Perdue. And so they've sent him over now, and they put him in the Bordeaux and Lucy McBath race. And they're promising that they're going to make him a congressman there. I think that they've sent the brother, you know how they were surfing him around?
Yeah. Every time you call his name, that's all I can see. Every time his name is called Shanan, that's all I see him doing, surf.
I think they didn't just surfed him on over, because he has a snowball's chance in hell of beating Kellen Perdue or Lucy McBath in that race. But that's what they promised him. So he had the Senate. He had governor. And they threw him out of that and said, we'll get you a little seat in Congress. And I don't think that's going to happen at all. But, such is life. That's what happened.
But next week, we're going to talk. Next week, let's talk a little bit more about that, because I want to talk about Brother King, the husband of Janelle King, who was the first black to announce that he was going to run against Reverend Warnock, right? Warnock. For the Senate, right? Then now you got all this big talk about Herschel Walker. Saying we'll talk more about how they were down there, the president was praising them, and they were this and they were all of that. President Trump did. Trump don't care nothing about nobody. Nobody but Donald Trump. That's only somebody.
Trump turned King into a pauper.
Hey guys, we'll be back.
He didn't turn him into a pauper.
Shanan and I'll be back next week with more Straight Talk right here. As that's all we doing is Straight Talk. This is totally Shannon's opinion and my opinion, but I tell you the truth, it's our opinion, and we bring it to you straight from the horse's mouth, our mouth. Until next week, hey, you stay tuned to Straight Talk, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to like the channel. Don't forget to hit the bell so you get notification when we come on the air, and do share it with your family and friends. Until next week, you stay tuned to nothing but what? Straight Talk.
Want to be a guest on Straight Talk? Email Greg Fann at FANN922@comcast.net or call 404-308-0795. Join us again for another episode of Straight Talk with Shanan Jones and Greg Fann, the Preacher Man.